Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, Getting From Here to There, Content Reuse for Word Authors. And today's tour guide, I'm happy to introduce, is our CEO at Simply XML here, Doug Gorman. Doug brings years of relevant information industry experience to Simply XML. He has worked with some of the world's leading technology companies, and here at Simply XML, we see XML as enabling architecture to make content management, single source, authoring, and publishing ubiquitous. And what we would like to do today is to get you started down that path in a very lighthearted way for your Word authors. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you're having any technical issues, if either visually or the audio, go ahead and send me your problem in the chat bar, and I will see if I can help you with that. If a few of you put through the audio problems, I'll understand that the issue's on our end. Otherwise, I'll try and help you individually. And also use that chat bar as questions. We did promise this was going to be a 40-minute webinar, and we aim to stay within that. But we typically have a few minutes at the end for questions, so as you have questions throughout, go ahead and put them in there, and I will start to stack them up for the end, and you'll have time as well at the end of the webinar to ask more questions. So to get started here with our webinar is Doug Gorman. Hello, Doug.
Hi, Erin. Thanks a lot. We're going to start with an informal poll. How many people think I did the portrait there on the front of the cover slide? Okay, Erin, everybody thinks I must have done it myself, huh? Okay, so here we go. We're going to talk about some common sense scenarios of getting lost and needing to get found. What you need to know as a minimum to get involved with single source publishing, information reuse, and more broadly the use of XML underneath everything. Every journey has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and we'll cover those things along the way. I want to say this is a light-hearted, non-technical look at this whole issue. If nothing else, I hope you remember the analogy and the symbolism of what I'm going to say. And if there are technical details you need, I hope you'll send Erin or me an email and we can follow up. Okay, so this is myself and my daughter Katie. And Katie actually is a little older now. I look exactly the same. Katie's graduated from college and she's working on her doctorate in clinical psychology. So I guess it's Photoshop because Erin got my current picture in there with Katie when she was a kid. Now Katie, admittedly, by herself, is spatially and directionally impaired. She had a couple of, she's always been this way, ever since it became really noticeable when she started driving and going places. But part of her interest in psychology came out of some concussions she had skiing and doing rugby. And those have only exacerbated her spatial impairment, which she admits. So we're going to talk about Katie for a little while. I could talk about her for longer, but Erin won't let me. So here we go. I'm going to go through 5 scenarios. So Katie gets lost and she calls me on the phone. And this happens regularly. Dad, I'm lost. Where are you? I'm at exit 20. What road are you on? I'm not sure. Where are you going? I'm going to my friend's house. Katie, I need to know what road you're on. I need to know what town you're in. I can't help you get someplace that I don't know about. So I can't help because there's not enough information. So you can't help somebody with this move to a new place without basic information. So when moving to XML, you need to decide where you're at, know where you're at, and one data point is not enough. You'll get a response that's prejudiced to where the person is sitting, rather than the whole organization's view of what it needs in order to have better information and information reuse and better content and lowered costs. So there are a lot of constituencies that can benefit from XML adoption, and one data point is not going to do it. So here's the second one, and actually this is all truth. All of these actually happened. Dad, I'm lost. I just left the house. I'm going back to school, but the road doesn't look familiar. What road do you think you're on, Katie? I think I'm on Route 95. Okay, well that's the right road, Katie. Which side of the car is the sun on? Oh, the right side? You're on the right road, but you're going in the wrong direction. So many people are heading to XML for good reason. Some are assuming DITA is the correct implementation for everyone in their organization. Some are assuming that the tools used in the technical area are going to be good for somebody else. So the problem is that early mistakes can create huge problems. Just because you're driving along doesn't mean you'll end up where you want to go. Number 3, this is the best one, I think. Dad, I need to find the Toyota dealer. Where are you? I'm at the gas station. What's wrong? Well, the gas station guy, I have a noise under the car. He said I need to go to the Toyota dealer. How do I get there? I said, well, what gas station are you at? I drove out of the college. I said, okay, I happen to go to the same college she went to. What exit of the college did you leave? So she tells me what road she went out, and she went to the end of the road and the gas station was on the right. And I said, okay, Katie, you need the Toyota dealer. Just look up, it's across the street. So the moral here is ask for help. You have to own it yourself. Don't go it alone. Professionals can help, and use experience of those who've traveled the path before to help guide you. Dad, I'm lost. I'm in the first week of class in my PhD program. I'm on Route 101. What town are you in? I don't know. Well, call me back when you see a town line or a hardware store or something that has the other data point. So once again, it's new territory. Where were you in the process? When you were lost, sometimes you need to take a time out. There'll be forks in the road. Just take a deep breath, a quick look at where you are, but also think again about all the reasons and where you were going. And finally, Dad, I'm lost. I'm going to Bar Harbor. You can tell she went to school in Maine. I'm going to Bar Harbor with some of my friends, but the sign says Canadian border. Okay, so here's the problem. You've got to keep track of where you're at along the way. So she told me she got to talking with her friends. They were listening to music, and all of a sudden she's seeing the Canadian border. Well, you've got to turn around and go back if you're going to Bar Harbor, or as we say in Massachusetts, Bahama. So you need to check in frequently. So make sure you know if you're off track, take regular stock of where you're at, and make sure you're on the right road to get to your destination. So now we're going to unpack this a little bit and dig into it. So the least you need to know before every journey is where you were, where you are, where you want to go, and what you want to do once you get there. Some other important factors. What equipment do you have? What are the long-term plans? What are the short-term plans? What are your backup plans? Who's joining you? So what do you need to bring? Pack your bags. What can be left behind? Many people in this move to XML try to bring everything with them. We had a customer recently that basically doesn't want to change anything but wants to move to an XML-based publishing system. Well, things have to change. You've got to leave a few things behind. Mentally, what's your skill level? What's your knowledge level? What's the knowledge level of the other people? What's your confidence level? What's your tolerance for getting lost? Do you want to just dive into a pilot in a small group, learn from your mistakes, and then figure out a plan? Or are mistakes not well tolerated in your organization and you have to spend more time getting ready, getting your team prepared? Do you have time to take the scenic route or the quickest route? Can you stop along the way? What's the intensity level in the organization regarding the effort that you're involved in? All of these are essential to your plans and your implementation of XML. So how simple is this journey? It may be a small department writing marketing materials, or we just had an organization writing sales proposals, and they wanted to reuse sections and different topics. That's pretty simple. If you've got a multinational organization that's using XML for all of its web-based information and all of its documentation and training materials with translation into dozens of languages, you've got a big job ahead. But think about how simple can this journey be, or how complicated is it? Can your trip be done in several steps? This is a real important thing to think about. We see organizations issue RFPs for authoring and content management tools and all the consulting and support, and the RFP is so detailed, and when we look at it, we know they will never get to the end of that implementation process, because things are going to change along the way. They're going to recognize the realities of where they're at and what they need to do, and things are going to change. So can you do it in multiple steps? Can you do it over a period of time? Can you have waypoints along the way that measure your progress? So where are those points when you can stop and reassess? When you get lost, how are you going to know if you're off track? And one way is calling the team together and getting some candid opinions there. Will you know when to ask for help? Will you be able to ask for help? And what about the final destination? Is it one destination for everyone? What's right for your content developers and your technical authors? Maybe two different things. What about marketing that wants to create some consistency and get into translating things like product sheets and white papers? So is there a way for everyone to be happy together? Well, we believe with XML underneath, there can be different levels of granularity in the implementation, and that everybody doesn't have to know what all 500 data elements are and how to apply them. The people in the technical area in a large organization may need that kind of granularity and detail, but the people in marketing, the SMEs, have jobs to do, and this is just incidental to their job to move to XML and authoring. These are people who, the people we support, work in Word, and they won't use Oxygen or XML, but they can work just fine alongside as long as the underlying architecture is consistent, whether that is DITA, or something we call simply structured, or a proprietary or custom XML structure. So what's your information architecture? It should be just enough. It should be everything you need and nothing more. And the architecture broadly in the organization might be quite complicated, involved, and have a lot of elements. But in each department that's implementing, it can be a subset of that. Easy to learn, easy to use. So your travel in this journey is a way to get to an end. And you're not doing it just for the sake of traveling. You're not implementing DITA or implementing XML. You're using XML or DITA or simply structured as an architecture to help you get somewhere, to get to being able to reuse information, to get to be able to publish to multiple channels, to get to lower your costs through information reuse and in translation. So you need to plan for the snags that are going to come up, and they will come up. So as you move to XML, our product is a Word to XML authoring tool. It's a publishing environment for organizations that want to permit everyone to reuse content, improve their publishing, implement standards, and contribute high-quality, reusable content to other parts of the organization. As you make this journey, there are decisions to be made along the way. There are decisions about legacy content. You've got a bunch of Word-based content that somehow has to move to XML, and there are 3 levels of this. There's stuff that can be moved as is. There's content that can be moved with some editing, and there's content that you should leave behind and not bring on the trip. There are new tools to be implemented or processes like workflow. Workflow might be as simple as checking in and checking out a piece of content for editing, or it might be more complicated and include a lot of review and approval cycles. Decisions need to be made about writers. Who's going to do the writing? Who's going to do the editing? How is the content going to be organized and divvied up? Generally, there's a move from divvying up content by manual or document to divvying up by perhaps organizational structure or product. And all of a sudden, there's a whole different view of content by the writers and editors themselves. You'll need to deal with storage, and if you need information reuse, a bigger group of people need to have access to the same content. So you need a shared repository. You may need a higher-end system that is specific, a content management system that provides a lot more functionality than just a shared set of files. Publishing, you need to improve how your look and feel gets used across your organization. One of the big advantages of moving to XML is to separate publishing from the creation of content. It's estimated that 20% or even 30% of people's time is spent in desktop publishing, and that can be greatly reduced by a move to these new tools. So my charge here is that the great trip to XML starts off with some planning and a realistic awareness of what's happening. We suggest you keep it as simple as possible, involve many different functions in the organization, and pick off one at a time and be successful all the way along the way. and you'll create a great journey and some great improvements for your organization.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Doug. If you want to take a minute, and some people have already just started to write in some questions, and if you go ahead and put that in the chat bar, I think Doug just closed the PowerPoint, but the webinar is still active, so we're just seeing a black screen, but he can bring that up. And we'll get started with some of the questions here. And the first one that we have is about getting management on board with XML. What do you recommend is the best way to get management on board with XML?
Well, we've seen two things. One, of course, is show them the money. You need to predict a return on investment. Ideally, that's financial, but it could be just in straightening out issues with people using your content. So a good ROI, but then secondly, quick results. We suggest breaking it up into pieces that are implementable. You show a strong result in one part of the company or for one kind of content, and then move on to the next rather than boiling the ocean and picking off all the organization's content at one time.
Excellent. And can you talk more about the different necessary tools to get started with XML? You mentioned authoring, storage, publishing, etc. Could you speak more about this?
Well, of course, every vendor wants to sell you their tools. Well, you need a way to create content, and that's some kind of editor. Billions of people use Microsoft Word. Organizations moving to XML generally have some people that can use products like Oxygen or XMetal for creating content. Once you create content, you need a place to store it, which is a repository. And that can be as simple as a file system where you can pass information around. But that limits the use of the content and doesn't allow a lot of reuse, except the cut and paste kind of reuse. The repository can also manage things like metadata, which is information about the content. It can help manage who can access what. It can manage workflow. So you need tools that the editors and writers can use. You need a content repository, and you need to understand how publishing is going to work and where published documents are going to reside, and then the associated processes and improved workflow and control that you can get from these implementations. So it's basically editors, repositories, and there are potentially some publishing tools as well.
Excellent. And we have another question about costs, about how to get started from unstructured to structured content. And he knows it can be upwards of $1 million, but good news is that we can do it much cheaper than that. But he's asking, one person's asking about tools, consulting, and training, and how that works with scale.
That's a mouthful, Aaron. The costs. Well, we would say you've got to do pilots to understand how your organization needs to change. There are software costs, but the bigger costs are personnel, and your personnel in the planning, the movement of legacy content, and transforming it into XML. costs can't really be determined until you understand your needs. So if a file system is good enough in a shared file, the costs are minimal. If you're going to have thousands of people accessing the same content, you're probably going to need a really high-end content management system, and those can cost $500,000 or more. Training really depends on what organization, internal organization you're dealing with. The people need to understand all of DITA and what the possibilities are and how to use it with an XML editor like XMetal. If that's the case, training is going to be a significant cost. For the Word-based authors, our quantity 1 cost is $750, and there's a huge discount for volume. So from an editing standpoint, you can get control of your Word-based authors, leave them in a Word environment so they see Word, but on the back end everything is XML. The costs are minimal there. And the training time is pretty low as well. Some people can just take a quick reference card, see a demo, and be off and running with our tool at the most basic level.
Excellent, thank you. We have another question here about how you handle existing content, or what we typically call legacy content, and what ideas you have for that.
Okay, I'll talk a little more about that. There are a number of organizations that have started with us. I'm only going to create new content using your tool, and that's easy. But then the issue almost always comes up is most content is not created from scratch. It's based on something that exists already. So most of our clients and customers have legacy content that might be in Microsoft Word. It might be in an old version of Microsoft Word. It might be in PDF. We've got a large utility now that has content that includes Excel and PowerPoint documents that they're using, and they want to create a nice standard for information reuse and control. So legacy content from Word has a structure to it, hopefully. There are word styles in the best case, heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are bulleted lists, and these need to be transformed into an XML architecture underneath. And this is done through an import process where the content and the documents are analyzed, looking at their headings, their types of Word content, and then translated into the underlying XML elements that the system is going to store. So maybe I didn't make it clear. The writer with our product always sees Microsoft Word, but we're taking control of that so they can't put in their favorite kinds of bullet points or their favorite ordered lists with Roman numerals or that sort of thing, or their favorite table structures. These things are controlled in a defined way by the underlying XML. So there's a lot of need to look at that content and, as I said earlier, decide which can be used as is, which needs some editing, and which you should leave behind. If you have PDF documents, what happens is when you output those back to Word, it's very flat. And it can be imported as normal paragraph and heading text, but then you'll want to add some richness to it, increasing the level of hierarchy within a document, and increasing some of the elements that are used to describe it, so you can potentially tell the difference, for instance, between a procedure and a process or knowledge information. And there are a lot of ways to do that.
Thank you. Another question we have, oh, thank you, sorry, Doug and I are actually sitting near each other, so we have to keep muting ourselves or else you pick up on both mics here. You mentioned about getting started with training and the importance of that, and what do you recommend about getting their authors started with structured writing?
It's a big move for authors to, in a consistent way, adopt a standard, and implementing the standard usually involves some sort of structured writing. XML, by definition, in the background is structured content. It can be as simple as, well, for example, DITA has a concept of a DITA topic, which is a unit of information that can stand on its own. DITA topics are assembled into DITA maps, which are collections of topics. And then at the broadest level, there are 3 levels of specialization. There's a DITA task, which is a procedure, a DITA reference, which is generally information that's referred to, often presented in a table, and then there are DITA concepts, which are knowledge information. It's very easy to write in topics, and it's relatively easy to import and transition content to DITA topics. It's relatively difficult to import, and more difficult in terms of learning, to really understand what a DITA task is and a DITA reference and concept. We have some organizations that just use DITA topic and DITA map, and that meets their needs perfectly with further hierarchy provided within sections and paragraphs. There are also structured writing tools like information mapping, which is where our background was originally. And there are courses available and seminars available. We give a course on how to write with our tool, information mapping, as courses. CIDM has just come out with a course in structured writing. So there's ways to be trained. I'd say the amount of training depends on the nature of your trip and where you're trying to go.
Great. This actually segues well into another question we got about information mapping. We are big information mappers, and we want to move to single-based authoring and publishing. What is the best way to get started with that?
Well, if you've been using information mapping, you're using structured writing. You understand the concept of an information block that has some parameters to it, an information map. The move to XML from information mapping is not as involved because there's already structure to the underlying content. Whether that content was created in plain old ordinary Word with templates or with information mappings, formatting solutions product, it's very easy to move all that content into XML if it was created with either formatting solutions or structured, because it's structured in a consistent way. So the move to XML and content reuse and multi-channel publishing and better and more efficient translation is very easy if you've already implemented that methodology.
Great. And we have time for one more question. And if any of you have any other questions or comments, we'd love to have these conversations offline and answer some of your specific situations. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through these questions as I'm trying to read here. And I'll answer one that I think would benefit a lot of people in the audience here. We've heard about DITA. We're familiar with DITA, but it seems very complicated. How do you suggest getting started with that? And so before I let Doug answer, this will be the final question, just because we promised that we would end it at 40 minutes, but we're very happy to continue these conversations offline. You can get a hold of us. We'll send out a copy of the slides afterwards, and you can reply to that so you have our email. But again, thank you for joining us. So Doug, the question was about getting started with DITA, simply.
Okay, so we've seen organizations who know they want to go to DITA, and we ask them why, and they say because everybody else is going to DITA. And that can be a trap. DITA can be implemented at a whole bunch of different levels. So it can be very simple, or it can be extremely complex. Out of the box, DITA has now some 500 elements, including the training specialization. And if you are going to implement all of DITA, and you need all of that, it's a very big deal. On the other hand, to start writing with DITA topics and DITA maps, a DITA map is an incredibly useful element or tool to string topics together. And some people, get it right away. I'm going to make these topics. They're going to be assembled into DITA maps. The DITA maps are going to be assembled into larger DITA maps. And at the end of the day, you might end up with a big document that's a collection of DITA maps. The same thing could be true if you start off with the idea of a manual. A good manual is organized in topics. So DITA can be implemented at many different levels. A danger we have seen is that oftentimes, rightly, the technical people implement and get incredible power out of the granularity of DITA. But then they assume that that level of granularity is needed by the marketing department, and the move from the technical area to the organization at large just dies under its own weight. So what we would say is it's great to use DITA, and a lot of different people in the organization can use DITA, but everybody doesn't need rocket science level DITA. So keep it simple. Implement in stages, understand everything your user needs, but don't give them anything else. So we'll end on that note, and we hope your journey is successful.
Okay, and thank you everyone. Thank you so much, and we will send out a copy of the slides and reach out to you afterwards to answer any questions you may have. Thank you so much for your time.